In 1982, Cindy James, a nurse in Vancouver, reported a series of terrifying harassment incidents. It started with obscene phone calls but quickly escalated to prowlers, smashed windows, and raw meat left on her doorstep. For 7 years, Cindy claimed to be the victim of a sadistic stalker who seemed to know her every move. Yet the police could never find a single trace of an intruder. The attacks turned physical. Cindy was found in her garage with a nylon stocking tied around her neck. Later, she was discovered unconscious in her yard with a paring knife through her hand. She claimed she had been injected with drugs and beaten. Despite the brutality, investigators became suspicious. There were never any fingerprints, footprints in the snow, or sightings of a suspect. As the reports crossed the 100 mark, the Vancouver police shifted their focus from the stalker to Cindy herself. They noted that the attacks often happened when she was alone or when surveillance was briefly interrupted. They suspected Cindy was suffering from a severe psychological breakdown and was staging the incidents to gain attention or cry for help from her estranged husband. To solve the mystery, the police installed a sophisticated security system and a 24-hour guard. Even under this intense scrutiny, the harassment supposedly continued. Cindy claimed the stalker was too smart for them. However, when the police had cameras, they caught nothing but Cindy herself moving around the house. The frustration between the victim and the authorities reached a fever pitch. On May 25, 1989, 4 months after checking herself out of a psychiatric hospital, Cindy disappeared. Her car was found in a local mall parking lot. Inside were groceries and a gift, but Cindy was gone. There was blood on the driver's side door, and items from her purse were scattered nearby. It looked like a violent struggle had finally ended in the abduction her family had long feared. 2 weeks later, on June 8, Cindy's body was found in the yard of an abandoned house. She was lying face down, her hands and feet tied tightly behind her back, in a complex series of knots. A black nylon stocking was cinched around her neck. The scene was horrific, seemingly proving that the stalker had finally finished his work. But the autopsy would only deepen the mystery. The coroner discovered that Cindy had died from an overdose of flurazepam and other drugs. Most shocking was the expert testimony regarding the knots. Despite how they looked, a forensic specialist demonstrated that a person could actually tie themselves up in that exact manner. The question became, did a killer drug and tie her, or did Cindy perform a final, fatal act of self-harm? The inquest into Cindy's death was one of the longest in British Columbia's history. After hearing months of conflicting testimony, the jury could not decide if it was murder or suicide. They returned a rare verdict of unknown. This left her family in agony, convinced she was murdered, while the police felt vindicated in their belief that the stalker had never existed outside Cindy's mind. Suspicion frequently fell on Cindy's ex-husband, Roy Makepeace, a psychiatrist. Cindy had claimed he was abusive, and some believed he had the medical knowledge to stalk her undetected. However, Roy had solid alibis for many of the attacks and cooperated with the police. He maintained his innocence, suggesting instead that Cindy's mental health had tragically spiraled out of control. Throughout the 7-year ordeal, Cindy's father, Otto Hack, remained her fiercest defender. He pointed out that it would be nearly impossible for Cindy to inject herself in the arm, tie herself up, and then walk to the abandoned house while heavily drugged. He believed the police had developed tunnel vision, ignoring real evidence of a predator because they found Cindy difficult. Private investigators hired by the family suggested a different theory: a local predator or a disgruntled patient from the psychiatric ward where Cindy worked. They argued that a pro could have easily bypassed her amateur security. They believed the police's public dismissal of her claims actually emboldened the killer, giving him a free pass to escalate his torture until the end. Psychologists who reviewed the case noted that Cindy's behavior matched factitious disorder, where a patient creates symptoms to assume the sick role. They argued the knots and the letters were too theatrical, designed to convince a skeptical audience. In this view, Cindy was a woman trapped in a self-made nightmare she couldn't stop until it accidentally, or intentionally, killed her. Even after Cindy's death, some of her friends claimed to receive silent, breathing phone calls similar to the ones Cindy had reported. This reignited the fear that a stalker was still at large. However, these reports were never verified by phone records. leading many to believe it was a sympathetic haunting, a psychological echo of the trauma Cindy had left behind in her social circle. The case of Cindy James remains one of the most debated in Canadian history. It is frequently featured in true crime media as the ultimate Rorschach test. If you believe she was murdered, it's a story of police negligence. If you believe it was suicide, it's a tragic study in mental illness. There is no middle ground, and the evidence is perfectly balanced to support both sides. Today, Cindy James is buried in an unmarked grave at her family's request, to avoid ghoulish tourists. Her story serves as a haunting reminder of the complexity of the human mind and the limitations of forensic science. Whether she was a victim of a monster or her own demons, Cindy lived and died in a state of terror that few will ever understand, her unknown end a final silent cry.